as a way of introduction, I go often when I'm in America, I work with schools a little bit on curriculum, and there's 4 years of high school, and usually they attribute 1 year of high school to a book. And discussion we always have, should you go grade by grade and go in order? Ninth grade Bereshit, 10th grade Shemot, or did the whole school learn the same book? And then you have the school is like screaming Sefer Shemot, and the school plays Sefer Shemot, and all the hallways is screaming Sefer Shemot. So I'm a big fan of the latter as far as spirit goes, and chavaya, what's called the experience of learning. As far as the logical order, it makes a lot of sense to go in order, Bereshit, Shemot, etc. If I remember correctly, Rav Soloveitchik, Allah Shalom, senior in Boston, Maimonides, had a very strict. They had spent 2 years of Bereshit, first half and second half, and the rest of Chumash. I forget exactly, but I remember when I was working with Maimonides, you couldn't budge from Rav Soloveitchik's setup. But he was but Bereshit helped for the older grades because it's more development. Anyway, that's just a great introduction. But when you have 4 years for 4 books, you got to cut one. So Vayikra always gets the cut. So as we'll see why when we finish Bamidbar, we'll see why Vayikra. If you're gonna do that, then you'll teach Vayikra when you teach Bamidbar. But that's a different shikol. Anyway, that's way of introduction. Whoever came, and now we'll start our series on Sefer Vayikra. And I'll share my source sheet real fast. I have a quick introduction if I remember what I wrote. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very good. Usually the name we give the books of Chumash is simply the first primary word of the book, but not the theme. I'll give examples. That's all we need to talk about now. Now we can, wait, I didn't share screen, did I? Oh, that's not enough. Okay. So I didn't share screen. I don't have to close my screen. I'll start again. um, the, the books, the names that we give the books in Hebrew is not the topic of the book, but it's the first word or first significant word of the book. Same thing with Parshat Shavua. Sometimes they happen to be the topic. Like Parshat Noach is pretty much the opening word and opening keyword and also the topic. But a lot of things are simply not the topic. So the Breshit is not the topic of Sefer Breshit. It's the first topic, but it's not the main topic. Shmot is not about names. And Bamidbar is not about the desert. I mean, things happen in the desert. In Devarim, it could be a lot of things, I guess. But what I'm getting at is the name that we give the book relates to the opening verse. And the word Vayikra, which happens to be actually the first word of the book, not only the first significant word, the first word of the book, it sounds like this is the first word. The question is the topic of the book. So in a more modern midrashic way of understanding, I want to explain today why Vayikra might be a theme of the book. And therefore, the title of today's shir was Vayikra, a calling or a concept. Because Vayikra means to call out. And I'll try to explain what I mean in the shir. Again, the title is just to make a point about what Vayikra is about. Now, we're going to start with a short little discussion with just to try to make sense of the book. And as Rabbi J mentioned, it's not, if you're going to learn Sefer Vayikra, usually you learn Kloshim to you, and maybe the Chagim and Amor, maybe Shemitah and Yovel, depending what year it is. If it's a Shemitah year, maybe you'll do that. Something about Korbanot here and there, Tumah V'Tara, be a little familiarity, but it's the Yom Kippur, maybe Avodah you'll have. But learning the book as a book is not that popular. Now, let me share my screen, and that was my little introduction. Okay, and so we're using the word Vayikra to explain this title we're having for this thing. Is it a calling or from Sinai to sanctuary to society? We'll explain the title by the end of the shir today. Okay, so based off your previous study of Vayikra, what do you think ties the book together? In other words, I have two basic questions. One's going to be, I want to discuss, is there something unique that's in Vayikra that's not in Breshit, Shmot, Bamidbar, and Devarim? And on one hand, like what makes Vayikra sort of unique? On the other hand, what makes it part of Chumash? So I hope the question's clear. So just quick, just short answers because Rabbi J wanted a little participation today. So just from what you remember, again, not a quick summary, like 15 seconds or less of what you think Vayikra was about. About first, what makes it unique? If I had to summarize the book, what's the book about? Okay, Suzanne, okay, Korbanot. I could have guessed that would be the answer. Korbanot, here we go. And that's for sure the right wrong answer.
God speaking outside the Mishkan, outside the.
Yeah, we'll talk about inside the Mishkan. We'll get to inside the Mishkan and outside the Mishkan, and how to be Kadosh like God, probably. Okay, so there's two words coming up, korbanot and kedusha. That's what I wanted to hear. That usually comes up. Okay, how to interact with God. Um, so that's interesting. The question is do you interact with God by feeding him? That's going to be the big question. What do you gain by bringing all these animals to God? Why does he need them? So we have to deal with that as well. But again, when you ask anybody, 9 out of 10 people say the book is about korbanot. Now, quick question. Where's the first time someone brings a korban chumash? Yeah, by the way, by Aryeh's point that Chazal called the book Torah Kohanim, we'll have to talk about that name. Torah means Kohanim, the guidebook for Kohanim. The question is, who's Kohanim referring to? The Kohanim in the temple, or the Mamlechet Kohanim, the people of Israel? That we'll deal with. We'll deal with that.
Hevel and Hayin.
Kevo. That's okay. That's what I wanted to hear.
Hevel and
Chazal
Cain
say,
and Hevel. Cain brought it first.
Okay, so that's the classic, I will call that misunderstanding, okay? Because it doesn't say that Cain brought a korban, nor Hevel. What did they bring? They brought a
Mincha.
mincha, which means like a
Animals
gift
and
to God.
plants.
Yeah. No, they did not bring a korban. So keep going. Do we have a korban in this week's in Parshat Noach?
Yes.
After the flood, but you look carefully, it doesn't say korban, it says olah.
Okay. All right.
Korban.
So,
Now, how about Avram? Did Avram bring a korban and call it in God's name? What would you say?
He builds a mizbeach.
He builds a mizbeach, and he calls that, but he didn't say what he brings on the mizbeach. He builds a mizbeach, which might mean he's having a cookout, and that's a good way to get people to listen to your Dvar Torah or your ideas. Invite them for food. Okay, but for sure, Toby's saying an olah is a type of korban, but the word korban is not there. Okay, now ready for a little surprise? I get to share my screen now, and I did an Ala Torah search. I'm just going to be right here. Actually, I'll open up my Ala Torah. It's one of the best tools there are. I'm sure Rabbi Grumman's going to use it in his class on whatever he's teaching. Do I have the right thing here? I opened up the wrong screen. Let me just close that screen. I just shared it already I did in Ala Torah. I did the word korban. I'm sorry. Share. Just here, our regular source sheet. No, I got it wrong. Here we go. That's good. Okay. So I did in the Concordancia in Ala Torah, I did the search for the word korban. Guess what? It's not in Bereshit. It's not in Vayikra. It's not in Shemot. The word doesn't appear. The word korban is mentioned first in the first line of Sefer Vayikra. 40 times in Vayikra, 38 times in Sefer Bamidbar. We'll see what it is primarily. And to our surprise, whoa, only twice in Yechezkel and twice in Ezra Nehemiah. And that's it. Doesn't that surprise everybody? Let me stop my share and look at your faces for a second. Isn't that a big surprise? Whoa. If you didn't have Ala Torah, you would never figure that out unless you had a share about it from someone who noticed it. Now, that means the word korban is unique to what Sefer? As we'll see, even the word korban in Sefer Bamidbar, we're going to see when we learn Sefer Bamidbar, in Sefer Bamidbar, we have many sections that belong in Sefer Vayikra. Anyone who's been in my shir on Bamidbar in the past, that's something we talk about a lot. In other words, the book of Bamidbar has its own theme. As the book of Bamidbar develops, every once in a while we interrupt the book of Bamidbar with sections that clearly belong in Sefer Vayikra. For example, the Tamidim Musafim that we read on the holidays in Parshat Pinchas, chapters 28 and 29 of Bamidbar, clearly belong in Sefer Vayikra with Parshat Amor. Because it says, V'kraftem Yishad Hashem, it's referring to that. Why it's in Bamidbar, that's a whole shir. But even the sections in Bamidbar that the word korban, you can identify them as logically they would belong in Sefer Vayikra. And the question is, why are they inserted into Sefer Bamidbar? So the word korban and Sefer Vayikra go together. And if you know a little bit of Hebrew, what's the Hebrew word hiding in the word korban?
Karov.
Karov, and karov means
Near.
at sacrifice. It means
Being close.
being near, being close. Being close to who?
Hashem.
Korban Lashem. And therefore, if I want to make an expression of my closeness to God, I bring a korban. Got the idea? And the fact that the word korban, the fact that Chumash uses that special word korban for when we bring an offering to God, I think that's half the book already. I mean, because I'm not bringing put it this way, the gift doesn't create the relationship, it has to reflect the relationship. If you bring an example from, bringing flowers to a spouse or something like that to a friend, if you're doing it to cover up bad behavior, that's it. No, if it's an expression of good behavior, it's accepted. If it's covering up bad behavior, it's a disaster. And therefore, a korban has to be an expression of being of closeness to God.
Vayikra is korban with mixing up aleph with beit.
So explain what you mean.
Vayikra,
No, Vayikra is a different word. Vayikra is a calling. The word korban means the word korban comes from being close.
Yeah, but you can make a word play, Vayikra and Vayikrav.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's that they have a similar kuf and a resh. There's wordplay there for sure. But I'm saying the word korban comes from the word karov. Vayikra has its own meaning. We'll see. We'll talk about the word Vayikra very soon. Now, in fact, I'm going to go there. Right, that's my next step. How do we go from the word korban to Vayikra? To what the purpose of the korban is going to be. Now, so now we'll play the game. 1 second. Let me look. I had another search in the book. Okay. There's another search I wanted to show you. I want to take Parshat Shavua we just read yesterday. If I look in Sefer Vayikra, what do the korbanot do for God? If you bring an olah to God, how does it affect God? What does God do to it?
Reach nichoach. Is that what
He
you want?
smells the korban, doesn't he? It sounds like he smells the korban. Parshanim don't like that. Read Ibn Ezra on Vayarach Hashem et Reach Nichoach. He says he's affected by it, but he's not. God doesn't smell.
It's like
I
a
told you my
reach
line.
of Noach.
Whether God has emotions. So of course God does have emotions, but he gets really angry at people who think that he does. So you can do with that whatever you want. That's how I always answer my students. Now back to Reach Nichoach. So that's what I want to share with you. So look at this. We had Reach Nichoach in the flood story. Got that? And now we get to share. Okay, I can use this one. That's fine. Look at Reach Nichoach. Here, I wrote Reach Nichoach. We have it by the flood. Okay? In Breshit by the flood, one time. We have it when they dedicate the Mishkan in Parshat Tetzaveh, in the 7 days of Miluim. We have it there. And the Korban Tamid in Parshat Tetzaveh. We have it, in the first half of Vayikra like crazy, especially in Parshat Vayikra. And Bamidbar, again, in the section that belongs in Vayikra. And that's it, except for a couple of times in Necheskel. Got that? So the word Reach Nichoach, if I look at those charts, Reach Nichoach and Korban go hand in hand. Now, what I want to claim is, and I want to use this as a little reminder of something we did back in Sefer Bereshit. When I read the flood story, the way I'm reading it, again, I'm reading it assuming that God gave us a flood story to appreciate what's going to happen later in Chumash. And if God's going to smell the Reich Nichoach, I need a flood story to appreciate what the purpose of the Korban is. Because if the Korban Olah and Mincha and Shlamim, and even one example of a Chatat usually is more, the word Kapara comes in. But when you have Olah and Shlamim and Mincha, the first 3 chapters of Vayikra, almost all of them are called Isher Reich Nichoach Lashem. The Korban Tamid brings a nation. Remember, we read in Rosh Chodesh a couple of days ago. What's it say? The opening line is the Korbanot of Tamid and the Musafim are all Reich Nichoach for God. I'm assuming that I need the story of Reich Nichoach in the flood story to appreciate why, what the meaning of Korban is. Let me explain why. If it's about relationship, in what context, what happens after God smells the Reich Nichoach? Who remembers from yesterday's Torah reading? God smells the Reich Nichoach, and then what does he decide?
Not to destroy the world with a flood again.
Yeah, he's going to do the most human thing. He's going to regret that he regretted. In other words, he's going to regret, and he's going to promise not to do that again. Of course, he doesn't have emotions, but we describe God with human emotions so we can relate to him. But then he gives a reason. Now, his reason isn't because, I want to smell these korbanot. What's he give the reason? Why did he decide to destroy them? because he was
Because
upset with
man
man's
is
behavior.
bad from his youth.
Yeah. Now, why does he change his mind? Kaviyachol? So look carefully. This is one of the most amazing things. This is classic Torah word. I don't think it was wordplay, but
Bedavka that they are this way.
yeah, first he brings destruction because we're bad, and then he's not going to do it again because we're bad, which doesn't make any sense. So if you look carefully at the wording, at the end of Parshat Breshit, at the beginning of chapter 6, when God explains the flood, we have the wrong book. Okay, Bible, Breshit. And we did this in detail when we studied Sefer Breshit, if I'm not mistaken. But go back. What's it say here? Vayar Hashem. Now remember, ever since day one, God's been looking at what he does. So there's Vayar Elokim et Or Kitov. Now, as God sees that things are good, after Gan Eden, where there's Tov and Ra, now Yud Ke Vav Ke sees that there's evil. Okay? Vayar Hashem ki rabba rat adam ba'aretz. Man's ways are evil. And this is the big line. V'cho yetzer machshavot libo rak kol hayom. Okay? His inclinations, his thoughts of his heart are just bad all the time. Now, it's man's a lost cause, and therefore God is, see the word Menachem with Noach. God, here it says repented. I don't think that's a very good translation. God changes his mind. God, that he made man, he regrets that he made man. And again, he's grieved by that. And then God decides to wipe out man and everything that came with him. Now, so look, just remember this line again. God sees ki rabat rat adam ba'aretz v'yetzim machshot libo rak kol hayom, only evil all day long. When the flood's over, in the end of chapter 8, we have very similar wording, but a reason why he's not going to do it again. So it says, Noach builds a mizbeach, and what does he bring on the mizbeach? From I'm sorry, he leaves it. Vayiven Noach mizbeach vayikach mikol beimah Torah. Now it never explains in Parshat Noach what's a beimah Torah. But basically, Beimah Torah are the animals that later can become korbanot. That's usually kvasim, mizim, tzon, and bakar. Okay? And Mikol Torah, the ones basically the birds and the animals that we domesticated that become that we can bring korbanot from. That's what Noach brings, and he brings these olot. He offers them on the altar. Then Vayarach Hashem et reach nichoach. That's the big phrase. Okay, and then what does God say now in his heart? Lo siv od kalo od atama babor hadam. I'm not going to curse the land again. Why? Ki yetzer lev hadam ra min urav. He didn't say man is bad all the time, but rather man is bad from his youth, which implies now, in contrast to chapter 6, before the flood, that he's bad in his youth. It's called adolescence, but he can learn from his mistakes and grow. Okay? And therefore, God's not going to do this again, meaning after the flood, we're living in a world of tikkun, of fixing things. That God no longer expects us to be perfect, he wants us to perfect. Now, if
What's
I'm
the
in a
role of
relationship with God,
ha'adama? What's the role of ha'adama?
okay, now all the Parashim talk about that because the land was already cursed with Adam Arishon. Now, the irony of all this, again, I don't want to go into it because this is like a really complicated topic the Parashim talk about, but just to give you a little direction, when Noach is born, remember his father Lemech, Noach didn't have a bris yet, but I guess maybe he had a Zever Aben. So when Noach was born in chapter 5, very end of chapter 5, Lemech, we have all these names. The only name we give a reason for is Noach. Okay, what does Lemech say? Okay, Vayikra shmo Noach lemor, Zei nachamenu mimasenu mitzvon yadenu min hadama asher hara Hashem. Okay, this man, this son Noach, will give us comfort, right, from our actions and from our grievances, whatever our, this curse of the land, which God had cursed. Now, when did God curse the land? When Adam sinned, remember? When God told Adam, because he blamed his mistakes on his wife, he says, now the land is cursed because of you. Now, if you calculate all the years, it's really neat. When Lemech was born, Adam Rishon was still alive. The first child born in Chumash that's recorded after Adam Rishon died, in other words, when Noach was born, calculate the years, it's after Adam Rishon's death. So the first birth after Adam Rishon's death is Noach, and Lemech, I guess, did the math. I guess he knew that Adam had died and knew the story, and therefore, what's Lemech say? Now that Adam Rishon is gone, maybe the curse of the land is gone. And what's the irony? Everything is wiped off the face of the earth in Noach. That's biblical irony, isn't it? The name. So again, what's happening? So Asher, your question's right on the mark, but there's something big going on that would take me the rest of the share to go into. Because the word Adam, I think Adama has a lot to do with Adam. And I'd like to say it's a dumb question. Because remember, Dam, okay? Dam, blood, Adama. And the idea is to recount the Dam with Korbanot. Asher, you're onto something really big. But again, that's too complicated for now. Now, because I want to get to that. I still haven't get to my source sheet yet, even. But I'm giving you a little introduction how we're going to deal with it. But I want to anchor.
One more question from this pasuk.
One more, yeah.
Vayinachem Meinu Nun Chet Mem, but the Nun Chet is the Noach, like he's
Yeah,
using Nun Chet Mem, but the Nun Chet is Noach.
Yeah,
So
and then and
the
it's saying
Mem,
Vayinachem Hashem. Now, if speaking of wordplay and irony, all of this is going to repeat itself in the story of the golden calf, isn't it? 40 days and 40 nights, finding favor in God's eyes, a covenant after a covenant, a broken covenant, and a reinstituted covenant. But what happens after the flood? God recognizes man has evil ways, but can learn from his mistakes. He's willing, therefore, to give him a chance. And even though God expects us to be perfect after the sin of the golden calf, when we re-establish the covenant, God announces his attributes of mercy, which enable us to do tshuva and learn from our mistakes. So we're not talking about a little side topic. We're talking about the biggest theme of Chumash, that our relationship with God, the way we grow in our relationship with God, is not just for sure not by feeding God, but by remembering in our relationship with God, is that he doesn't expect us to be perfect, but he wants us to learn from our mistakes. And therefore, I can bring an olah, even if I didn't do something you're chayiv karet. You follow? If I just did, it's when you bring an olah, Chazal say, if you've mevato mitzvah say, it's something when you're not chayiv achatas, but you feel bad about what you did. And you can also maybe out of thanks. If thanks already, maybe you might bring a shlamim. But bringing something to God as an action, some physical action, reminding you of that I can learn from my mistakes, I can grow my relationship with God, I can become close to God by improving on my behavior. I'm using the flood story and the first use of Reich Nichoach to establish that idea. Hope that point's clear. In other words, I'm using the story of the flood as a platform to give a deeper meaning to a custom that all humankind had. All civilization brought sacrifices. So we're not going to change society. You can't have a religion without sacrifice. We're going to give it meaning. And we're going to see over and over again how the stories in Sefer Bereshit are going to give meaning to all the korbanot, not just the korbanot, which animals we bring, how many animals we bring. Remember the Ayolola, right, the Akedah, and the 7 kvasim by Avram Avinu. We did this all back in Bereshit. The Sir Lachatat, the story of Yosef. So when I read Bereshit as a background to give meaning to our sacrificial offerings, whoa. In other words, what I'm getting at is that you can't really appreciate the meaning of a korban if you don't read Sefer Bereshit first. And that was the question, how the books relate to each other. If I have only Vayikra by itself, it seems like God's very hungry. But when you understand how religion works, and you can't have a religion without sacrifice in ancient times, so you need sacrifices, but the purpose of the sacrifice, I'm going to give it meaning through the stories that precede it, the stories and the wording the Chumash uses to get that idea across. Now, if I take that to Tefillah, Keneged Korbanot, then we have a home run already. Then what we're doing today in Sefer Vayikra can add meaning to our rituals of davening as well. If Tefillah Keneged Korbanot, because Tefillah can also be understood as a ritual, like just say these magic words, or as the purpose of Tefillah being close to God and remembering we can learn from our mistakes, like asking for God to help us want to do tshuva and asking God for de'ah, to know between good and bad. Because I could use the stories in Chumash to appreciate the brachot and Shmon Esrei, what we pray for. As we pray for knowledge so that we have the ability to learn from our mistakes and do tshuva, which is the opening blessings in our daily prayer. Okay, now let's get back to work. Now I gotta get to the key word, the word Vayikra. I'm saying the word korban is unique, that comes with Vayikra. And now we're ready to start why the word Vayikra is so important. So now I guess what question I'm going to ask. Where's the first time we have Vayikra in Chumash if you didn't have Ala Torah in front of you? I purposely didn't put this on the source. I mean, it's later in the source sheet, not on the opening page.
And does Hashem in Gan Eden talk to
Very
Adam?
good. Yeah. Who's God called to in Gan Eden?
He calls to Adam.
He calls Adam. Now, so God calls upon man, but he's getting called upon, meaning being called out on in a negative way.
Right.
Yeah. Any other time like that in Chumash? Do you remember? Any other, again, people calling other people. No, again, God gives out names and things like that.
Did Adam
Yeah.
call the animals?
Creation
So,
story.
yeah, but I'm saying you have the word
Creation
Vayikra over and over again in giving
Oh.
names like people. Yeah, all the creation story for sure. God gives out names. I'm talking about God using the Vayikra in a conversation with man. That's what I want. It was when no, sometimes God speaks. Okay, by Dabar Hashem and Moshe, by Yomer Hashem. God speaks to man. God talks to Abraham Avinu. But before talking, where do I have a case where before God says something to a human being, it's preceded by a calling? Before I answer the question, I want you to understand how important that's going to be.
Hashem named the
If
or
God,
and the or.
again, I'll clarify my question again. I'm not saying where do we have the word Vayikra with God calling out, even God calling a name or anyone calling a name. Where does God talk to a human being? And before talking to that human being, he calls upon him. You understand there? He calls out to him and then he talks to them.
In Moshe by the
Where by
burning
Moshe?
By Har Sinai.
by the burning
At the burning bush. Perfect. Okay. Now that can't be by chance. That the first time God does it again is by the burning bush. But I think is that now we'll see the burning bush narrative in a minute. It's all in the source sheet in a minute. If you looked at it in the source sheet, you saw already where we're going. But if you didn't look at the source sheet, want to guess where the next one's going to be? He calls out to Moshe the burning bush. You
Har
remember?
Yeah,
Sinai.
yeah,
And
to come
also,
up,
but
to come
Har,
up the mountain. He's called
yeah,
Vayikra. He
and
calls to him.
Har Sinai
In Har
after
Sinai,
they
we're going to have
did
it in a real
with the
key place.
ego.
Yeah.
No?
Now, who's God talking to at Har Sinai? We'll see in a minute. Thing, but we have a lot of calling out in Har Sinai, and as we're going to see, there'll be two key times in Har Sinai. We'll see, and then we have Sefer Vayikra. Okay, you with me? I'm going to show you that. You see the title now of our series, From Sinai to Sanctuary, and the word Vayikra. The word Vayikra, when God calls out to man, with a message to man, with first calling upon him and then talking to him with a certain type of manner calling or a calling upon man, it's going to be related directly to Sinai and the Torah, and not just Sinai, but the covenant in Mount Sinai. And now we're going to go to the source sheet and get to work. You with me? Hope I didn't. I want to make sure we're not lost. I want to anchor our whole series, what we're going to talk about. Where are we? Share screen, and we get to. No, we need. Oh yeah, no, that's not right. Where's my PDF files? That's Word, PDF. Here we are.
Wait,
Here
so
we are. Okay.
Menachem, you're not going to count the Vayishla, when the Malach Hashem calls out
Oh,
to
that
him.
it'll get an honorable footnote in my
Okay,
source sheet.
thank
Okay. Yeah, I should say there. Okay. What I have here. Okay, so we talked about what the book is about and how we saw the books of Chumash. And we talked about Korbanot, okay, what's the purpose been? Okay. And then okay, we did our ABCs. So we have a summary in our source sheet. Now, Sinai to sanctuary, got it? Okay. So in Breshit, God calls upon man, ask him, what's he ask him? Remember, Ayeka doesn't mean where are you, but why aren't you with me? Why aren't you here? Didn't we talk about that once? There's Afo and Aye. That's Afo is where is something. Aye, why isn't it here? So if Yosef's looking for his brothers, he says, Afo Morim. I don't know. Now, if I'm in class and the student's not there, I ask, where's John, where's Yossi? I don't want to know where he is. I want to know why he's not in class. And if I'm walking to a cookout with my daddy, and usually we go for a cookout, we have, we have coal, we have a barbecue, we have a grill and an animal, right? And meat. And we're walking on the barbecue and there's no meat, right? I'll ask my daddy, Aye has said la'olah. Not where is it, but why isn't it here? And so Aye, that explains the word for Aye Sari Shtech is also, but that's too complicated for now, for Pasha Ba'era. But Aye is, why isn't it here? Afo is, where is it? And therefore, in fact, what does God answer man? That means, what does man answer God? He doesn't say where he is. He's explaining why he's hiding, correct? God didn't say, Adam didn't say, hey, I'm here behind the bush. Say, no, God knows where he is. But rather, God's asking, why are you hiding from me? And Adam explains why he's hiding from God. Because he's leaving now, the idea of being in the presence of God and being close to God, whoa. So it's not by chance we have the word Vayikra here, and Vayikra with korbanot. So that's our first Vayikra, and it's it's a bit of an anchor. Now, as you mentioned, Ruth, the Akedah has Eper as Hashem's angel, and therefore, I'll skip it. But I think there's something covenantal there as well, because God makes the shvuah on the covenant with Avraham Avinu, but that would take too much time. But for sure, that's going to add. Now, okay, the burning bush is the first time God sees that Moshe, what do you call it? It was inquisitive, and then Vayikra elav Elohim mitoch hasneh vayomer Moshe v'yomer hineni, and the rest is history. So the whole burning bush narrative begins with God. Do you understand why I'm calling it a calling? A calling and a concept of the word Vayikra. It's a calling for closeness, or I see later readiness. Okay, then, and therefore I'm sending you to Paro and take my people out of Egypt. And then he goes on, and how's the whole thing end? What's your main job? Go to Pharaoh and tell him, what are we going to do? We're going to leave Egypt and we're going to serve God on this mountain. So the first calling upon God at the burning bush at Har Chorev is in preparation for serving God on Mount Sinai, which will be the Brit at Har Sinai, because we actually we bring a lot in Shlamim when we say Nasa v'Nishma in chapter 24 in Shemot. Okay, so that takes us right to Shemot chapter 19. The next time I Vayikra, which can't be by chance. And then, remember my point? God talks over and over again to man, but calling upon man before talking to him has to be significant now. Because God's opening revelation to Moshe Rabbeinu, burning bush, Vayikra. And then in chapter 19 in Shemot, we arrive in the third month at Har Sinai, we know that. And now here's the key point. Moshe goes up to God. Vayikra elav Hashem min har lemor, kol tomar lebeit Yaakov. Now this is a little different. God's not calling upon Moshe and telling Moshe something. God's calling upon Moshe to tell Bnei Israel something. You see how we're going up a stage? This is the calling for Moshe to talk to give a message to the people of Israel from God, because who are we quoting here? Who's talking to who in Pasuk Dalet Hey Vav? Right? It's not God talking to Moshe. God's talking to the Jewish people, to the agency of Moshe, because God's talking in first person to the people. Atem ritem, you, the people of Israel, saw what I did to Egypt. I brought you here on the wings of eagles, etc. Now you're here. And now if you plural, you follow my voice and keep my covenant, which will be the covenant Har Sinai, okay? And then you'll be my treasured nation. Vatem, you, the plural, will be for me a mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. And that's what you have to tell Bnei Israel. Therefore, this is God calling upon Moshe to talk to the people of Israel on his behalf, to offer them the covenant to be a nation in the service of God. Now, why is that important? Because a mamlechet kohanim, in other words, we as a nation represent God, and if we're going to call Sefer Vayikra Torah kohanim, so who are the kohanim? Who are the kohanim for sure there's kohanim for the Jewish people.
Am
So
Yisrael.
for the Jewish people, there's kohanim who are liaison to God, but the Jewish people are kohanim for the other nations, and that would be a big theme of Har Sinai, and that'll be that would be the background to the two halves of Sefer Vayikra that we talked about in our title. Is it one book or two books? But if you and I didn't want to start with that with academia. Academia, it's called P and H. I don't want to get into all that, but the first half of the book is the priestly section, the other holiness section, and now they're doing a beautiful analysis of the book. They're cutting on to something, but the conclusions we're going to argue with, because you can't miss the two halves of the book. But the two halves of the book will be the whole point of the book, of the purpose of the purpose of the Mishkan is what happens when you leave the Mishkan, and that's why it's important they're in the same book. But again, we'll deal with that as we go through the book. Now, so that's the first calling, and then we make that covenant. Chapter 19 and 20, we get God declares his dibrot, and then there's more laws to learn, and therefore God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, come up the mountain. At the end of chapter 24, after we say Nasa v'Nishma, and we study the background, the key laws in the covenant. Then God tells Moshe, come up the mountain, and I'm going to give you the Luchot HaEven, remember, and the Torah and the Mitzvah, whatever that might be. That's a big machloket, but there's more laws to come and teach. And then Moshe goes up the mountain. Remember these phrases? Moshe goes up the mountain, and the mountain's covered by a cloud, remember? And God's glory is on the mountain. We're going to have these words are going to repeat themselves. We'll see. These psukim will repeat themselves in Sefer Vayikra, pasuk -1 or -3. We'll see in a minute. Well, we did this at the end of our series on Shemot, so it's a bit of review. So Kvod Hashem is on Har Sinai, and the cloud covers it for 6 days. And then the next Vayikra el Moshe b'yom hashvi mitoch Hanan, and God calls upon Moshe. But wait, what follows every Vayikra till now? God calls upon someone and talks. Remember? Vayikra Adam Bayomer. Vayikra Moshe Bayomer. So here by Vayikra, and what's missing? There's no speech yet, is there? He calls upon Moshe from the Anan, and then we have a parenthetical comment. Oh, by the way, Kvod Hashem was to the eyes of the people was like a burning fire, and Moshe goes into the Anan and goes to the mountain, and Moshe was there for 40 days and 40 nights. And what does God speak? So maybe in chapter 25 with the laws of the Mishkan, but it doesn't say that. And according to Chazal, that was in the second 40 days. But we're sort of hanging here in the end of chapter 24, where God's calling upon Moshe Rabbeinu, I guess to what do you call it? To enter the Anan. But Moshe can't go in the Anan for the first 6 days until God calls him in. But what should happen? God should talk to him. But it didn't say that here. Now, then we get to the very end of Sefer Shemot. This is a review we did at the end of last year. In the meantime, Moshe on the mountain, the people sin with the sin of the golden calf. God breaks the covenant. Moshe breaks the covenant. Moshe negotiates a new covenant. Moshe gets called up for the second 40 days. We build the Mishkan to show God. Remember, the Mishkan builds a nation. We're going to show God we're ready to serve him. We learn from our mistakes. We have that joint project. And now the question, will God's Shekhinah return? And sure enough, at the end of Sefer Shemot, what happens? Remember what's happening there? Therefore, they build the Mishkan, etc. Moshe finishes the work. Vaychas Hanan et Ol Moed, just like beforehand. Vaychas Hanan at Har Sinai. What does it say here? Okay. The end of 24. Yeah. Vaychas Hanan et Ol Moed. Okay. Vaychas Hanan et Har. Vaychas Hanan Shesh Tamim. So here at the end of Shemot, Vaychas Hanan et Ol Moed uchvod Hashem malei et Mishkan, just like Har Sinai. And then Moshe couldn't go into the Ol Moed because of the Anan, but Kvod Hashem was there. And then we're sort of left on a cliffhanger at the end of Sefer Shemot. What happened? Moshe can't go in.
When he's
And then,
waiting
by
for-
the way, when the Anan went up, when they traveled, when the Anan went up, they didn't travel. And then we switched to the theme of travel, of Masa. So we explained that these last psukim take us right to Sefer Bamidbar. But if I follow carefully, these final 5 psukim of Sefer Shemot, Pasuk Lamed Daled and Lamed Hey, take us right to Sefer Vayikra, and Pasuk Lamed Vav, Lamed Zayin, Lamed Chet take us to Bamidbar. That was our last shir that was our closing shir when we studied Sefer Shemot a month or two ago, in the summer. Now, if this is the introduction to Sefer Shemot, then what happens? So the Anan we're back to where we were in Perek Daled in Shemot, where God called upon Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe goes into the Anan. So now, if the parallel is complete, just like here at Har Sinai, what happened? God called upon Moshe after 7 days, and then gave him the laws of the Torah. Later we'll see lots of Sefer Devarim. Now what happens? Moshe can't go in until God calls him, but I'm waiting for the calling. And sure enough, that's going to be the first pasuk of Sefer Vayikra. It was from here. The Anan covers the Ol Moed. Moshe can't go in. And then the opening psukim of Sefer Vayikra is going to be the continuation. And this was a parallel we just did before between Shemot 24, the end of Parshat Mishpatim, Vaychas Hanan Anan, Vaychas Hanan Ol Moed, Kvod Hashem. It's a nice color. You can print out later on and look at it on your computer. But here Moshe couldn't go in. And then that takes us, these psukim take us to Vayikra, and those psukim take us to Bamidbar. And then okay, that goes back to, we'll go back to this in a minute. So in light of that, what happens? If I go back now to open up Sefer Vayikra, what happens? Where are we? Sefer Vayikra, back to our regular Tanakh. Vayikra should be right here. Here we go. No, we don't want that. We want Hebrew English Chumash. Sefer Vayikra. Okay. Then Vayikra Moshe, and God speaks to Moshe. Got it. So God calls upon Moshe, and he talks to him from the Moed, and with loss of Korbanot. Now, which means after the Mishkan is built, remember, ever since we sinned with the sin of the golden calf, the Shekhinah has been outside the camp. God talked to Moshe Rabbeinu, but in the Oel Moed outside the camp, the Tet meeting outside the camp, that was in Perek Lamed Gimel, Perek Lamed Gimel in Sefer Shemot and Parsha Kitisa. And now that the Shekhinah returns to the Mishkan inside the camp, the first thing that God tells Moshe after the Mishkan is built, guess what? You can come and visit. Therefore, there's a calling to Moshe to talk to the people, Daber B'nai Yisrael, again, like we had in Har Sinai. And therefore, I'm using this to anchor that Sefer Vayikra is linked to Mount Sinai, from Sinai to sanctuary. And therefore, when I visit the sanctuary, I'm coming not to feed God, I'm coming to remember my covenantal commitment to be a Mamlechet Koni V'Goy Kadosh. But when you have a commitment which is so important and so eternal and so central to our existence, I need a constant reminder of our covenantal commitment to be God's people. And to do that, you need ritual and routine. And therefore, on a national level, we have the Korban Tamid. And we have, as a nation, the nation brings a Korban Tamid every day, every morning, special Korban on the holidays to remember all those themes. And then an individual also, it's not only a connection between God and the people, but a God with individuals by way of the people. And therefore, an individual can also come and visit God. And that's a big chiddush. That's something revolutionary, possibly, in religion, where any individual can come to the temple as well, not just priests. It's open for everybody. Now, what can you bring? That's up to you. And that's what would be already our first year in Sefer Vayikra. The main thing is coming to God. It's coming to God. Adam wants to become Korban Hashem. And he has a choice from an animal, from tzon, we'll see later on, from flour. And he can give the whole animal to God, or he can be Jewish and give God the high cholesterol in the blood and eat the rest of the animal, which is a great idea, shlamim, what a Jewish concept. Now, half in jest and half seriously. Now, what's the idea of, why is that important? Sharing, why is the shlamim going to be important? Because at Har Sinai, we had olot and shlamim, but we said Nasa v'nishma. I'm sure you remember that, in case you don't. Genesis, we finished with Genesis. In case you forgot, you were there, but you might have forgotten. Shemot 24:7. Remember? Moshe tells the people all the laws. Moshe writes down the words of the Torah of Har Sinai, or the covenant. And then Moshe sends the young people of Israel, or the servants, Vayalu olot, vayizbechus vachim shlamim. They bring olot and shlamim in Har Sinai. And dafka parim. Now, remember, these parim will explain the holidays. Moshe takes the blood and puts them in big containers. He takes Sefer Abrit and reads it out loud, and the people answer Nasa v'nishma, and then the blood of the korbanot is sprinkled on the people. So if I'm going to have a sanctuary where I bring sacrifices, olot and shlamim, and I sprinkle the blood symbolically, that's going to remind me of the commitment we made at Har Sinai of Nasa v'nishma, good old 24/7. Of accepting the eternal covenant to be a people representing God. And to do that, I go to my boss. Remember, we are employees, not consumers when we stand in front of God. I'm going to remember who my boss is, what my job is, and my relationship with God. And I come to remember not only I want to be close to God, but the way I become close to God is by learning from my mistakes, growing my relationship with God, always trying to do better, and always ask myself, what can I do to be an Eved Hashem? And the rest is details. Got it? That's my introduction to Sefer Vayikra. That explains from Sinai to sanctuary. So I'm using the key words and the key themes of Har Sinai to show you that Vayikra is not just a book about korbanot. They say, oh, some ritual book about korbanot. The wording the Chumash uses, using the word Vayikra, right? Before talking to God, connecting it not just to building the Mishkan, but connecting it directly to Har Sinai. It's and that gives special meaning to korbanot. And again, to the whole series on Vayikra, if I find meaning to korbanot, I'll find meaning to our day-to-day prayer. And if I find meaning in the sanctuary, I find meaning in coming to shul. And if I want to design a shul, or run a shul, or plan activities in a shul, then it has to be Sinai-based. It's not only about this, you need a social hall, because there was a social hall at Har Sinai, but it's not only about a social hall, it's also about prayer, it's also about Torah study, and learning how to be, and not just learning how to be a good Jew, but learning how to learn from your mistakes and learning how to be, what your goals as Jewish people are, and the rest of all the themes of Judaism. Now everything we just said is all the famous Ramban. I'll just review it. We did this in Shemot, but for the sake of it, just for the title again, I want to go back to Sinai, the sanctuary. We'll go back to another Vayikra in a minute, but I want to just get the Ramban clear. Remember, V'soda Mishkan, Sheya Kavod Asher Shechana Har Sinai Shochin El Benistar. Everyone, God's revelation, Har Sinai was to everyone was open, and we want to have the same feeling of Har Sinai, but in the Mishkan, it's not with thunder and lightning, etc. Like it was at Har Sinai. It wasn't Nigla, it wasn't revealed. It wasn't a open like wild revelation. It's a hidden revelation, and that's the idea of the Ramban, the Kabbalist thing, the idea of Hester sometimes being a higher level than Nigla, because if God can be hidden, but you feel as though He's present,
15 and
that's high level. Yeah, and then and the Ramban simply does the same thing we did in Shir. He compares chapter 24 in Shemot with Har Sinai, with the end of Sefer Vayikra in Shemot Lamed Dalet Hey, and we'll see why he ties it in a minute. Why he ties it to Dvarim Hey, and in Sefer Dvarim. Okay? And then he explains 2 times Kvod Hashem and Har Sinai, and then his big line later on is Vaya Mishkan Tamid in Yisrael HaKavod Shinoi Ela B'Har Sinai. The Kvod Hashem in the Mishkan was parallel to what was Har Sinai. Okay? And then when Moshe came to the Mishkan, that's where God, just like God spoke to Moshe in Har Sinai, now he speaks to Moshe from the Ol Moed. And that was the famous Ramban. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu, as a Talmid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Eved Hashem, when he wants to teach the new generation in the 40th year before they enter Israel, and wants to give them and review from them all the events of Har Sinai, look how Sefer Dvarim begins. Not that remember the main speech in Sefer Dvarim from chapter 5 to 26? Look how chapter 5, look how Moshe Rabbeinu is a Talmid Muk of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is what Moshe does. Remember, there's a speech in chapter 25, and in Sefer Dvarim, it goes from chapter 5 to 26. How's chapter 25 begin? Vayikra Moshe Kol Yisrael Vayamar Lehem. Isn't that awesome? That's what Moshe does. Okay? And then he tells them, Shema Yisrael L'chu Mishpatim, which God, and Hashem Elokeinu Kratim Anu Brit B'Chorev. Okay? And that's the whole speech. That's the speech from 5 to 26, which begins with the 10 Commandments, remember in chapter 5, and all the laws that come with it. And then we have a Brit at the end of the book, called Brit Nitzavim, which is a Brit, remember, that you can't break out of the Brit, the eternal bag. It was what Chazal say about Nasav and Ishmael, in Pshat, is in Parshat Nitzavim, this binding on all generations. And how's the book end in Brit Nitzavim? Vayikra Moshe Kol Yisrael V'Yomer Lehem, again. Look what I did for you. Look what I did for you. The historical prologue, what's called. And therefore keep this Brit. And therefore Atem Nitzavim Ayom Kulchem. And then V'Overcha B'Brit Hashem Elokecha. And he goes to establish you as a people. This is the idea of the start of Brit Milah. He'll be our God, we'll be his people. Like he told our Avot. And that's at Har Sinai. And this Brit is not only with you, it's for all future generations as well. Okay, to those who are here, remember we talked about that we didn't learn Parshat Nitzavim yet. Actually, I did give you a share on Parshat Nitzavim in the Parsha series. Remember? I got that. So we did that back then. So that's our, so I hope you follow what we did. The word Vayikra, you catch on to that? But Vayikra, God calling upon someone, preceding God talking to him. With men in Gan Eden, about relationship, how come you're hiding from me? Opposite of not being close. And then, what do you call it? Remember, God tells, what's the first thing God tells Moshe Rabbeinu? Al tikrav halom. Then first take your feet off. No, don't come before you need to come close, but before you come close, prepare yourself. Take off your shoes. But see the word korban, karov there again. Al tikrav halom, remember the burning bush. And then, so the word Vayikra, again, God talking to Moshe Rabbeinu in preparation for Har Sinai, and then God talking through Moshe to the Jewish people, Vayikra at Har Sinai with the covenant, and then the laws of the covenant that come with it, with the first 40 days on Har Sinai, and then fixing the problem with the Mishkan after the sin of Chet Egel, and then when Moshe tells the people now we have a Mishkan, how you as individuals come close to God, Sefer Vayikra, God calls upon Moshe to tell Bnei Israel again, here's how you build your relationship with God. And you don't come to feed God, you come to meet God, to come close to God, but you can't come empty-handed. Now, the analogy I like to bring with all my students is when you go to someone's house for Shabbat. I think I did this before. Remember? When you go to someone's house for Shabbat, some people, not me, but normal people, that you go, you bring something. Now, so when I taught this to my students one time, I told them, you don't go to someone's house for Shabbat with a bag of potatoes. even though that's what they probably need. You go with a bottle of wine, chocolate, cake, something that you hope that they'll share with you. Now, if you want to bring a korbanolo, you bring flowers. But if you want to bring, if you like rogalach, you like so, and you know they don't eat them. That's the best. But you bring something that's symbolic, something sweet, something nice. Now, but you're not coming as a wall delivery. You're not coming as a delivery person to bring them to deliver wine or cake. You're coming to be with them for Shabbat, but you don't come empty-handed. It's just human nature. That's like it's called a house gift. So what happened to me one time, a student came over for Shabbat, and my wife answered the door, and she brought a bag of potatoes to us for Shabbat. So sometimes you have to be careful what you tell your students. Okay. Now, but it's a fun story. So that's the idea of, I think anyone who knows the idea of being a guest somewhere, bringing something, knows that idea. So that's our little introduction to Sefer Vayikra. Now I'll end the share with a quick outline of the book. Oh wait, there's lots of things in the chat. I better check the chat real fast. Hit the wrong button for share. No, that's not good. Share. At the end, we're going to use this outline for the rest of the year. But I put it on the first source sheet in Vayikra, or the two halves of the book. Okay, so here's the basic outline. It's called Parshat Vayikra Tzav. Parshat Vayikra is voluntary offerings, the mandatory offerings, and then how to bring korbanot. It's the units in Vayikra are so like it's like an organized book. Finally, organized to the T. Not in chronological order, but definitely in thematic order for sure. It's easy to find units. Then we have the story of dedication to the Mishkan. Again, we'll study each unit and figure why the order that they're in. Then, when man can't come close to God, in other words, who can't come visit God, but it's only temporary. And someone who can't visit God temporarily is called Tameh. And once the purpose of Tumah is to get to Tahara. In other words, it's only temporary. You can't come close to God. Sometimes you need a timeout in your relationship, and then how you get yourself ready for the time in, and then ending with the Avodah Yom Kippur, by that ends the unit, and then chapter 17 we have to deal with, a little complicated. Then starting chapter 18, we talk about the Kedusha of man, about what's called how not to behave, chapter how you should behave, and then special laws for Kohanim, we'll see outside the temple, and then there's Kedusha in the realm of time, Parshat Emor, the special times of the year. There's Kedusha in the realm of land or space. That'll be the Shemitah and Yovel laws. In the second half of the book will be, again, it'll be temple related, but more about the effect of the temple outside the land. We'll deal with this in detail. And then why the book we'll see why the book actually ends in chapter 26 with the covenant, with the Tochacha, and why chapter 27 is I call it an epilogue, and how it ends the book. But that's the so we have to deal a lot with the word. We didn't deal with the word Kedusha today, but that'll come up a lot in the book. Again, not only in the second half, also be in the first half. But that was there. So that's the overall. And let me just take a look at the chat real fast, and then we'll finish up chat. Oh my gosh, 18. What happened here? Oh, here's the sources. Okay, korbanot. Okay, that's all the korbanot. That's what I've called Kohanim, kind in heaven. Okay, very good. Mincha gift. That's good. Okay. So we answered all those. The first time Adam is after he sins. Okay, very good. Milton points out the first time God has a relation with man is when he sins. Now, if you know your machshava, it's bound to happen. It's not that the sin causes the relationship, even though there'll be a chassidut, they'll think that way. It's in Breslov, would love that. If I understand Breslov right, then you have to be about tshuva to be close to God, sort of. Like that, vastly expert on Breslov machshava. But that's cute. What Milton points out is that God only talks to man after he sins. I mean, that's true. He talked to him beforehand when he gave him his diet, and when he gave him gave him laws, what you can eat, what you can't eat. But the calling out, being called upon by God, is only after he sins. But again, he was getting called upon with the hope that he would do tshuva. Okay, Efo is ayeh, which is ayeh keke. Ayeh is part of ayeka. Very good. Oh, very good. Okay, very good. Like Ech and Echa. Very good, Yosef. I like that. God, he says Efo is Tayeh, like Ech is Te'echa. Ech is Ayeta. Now, there's also Vayikra b'Shem. Oh, no. That's God calling out his own name introducing to the midot. Very good. That'll be a good point. In other words, that's not God calling out and then talking, but um, but it's interesting. That's exactly Har Sinai. That's the second Luchot, but it's a very, very good Vayikra. Okay, remember, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem is not what a lot of people think. It's not Moshe calling out in God's name. It's God calling out his own name. Now, God's not calling upon Moshe and then talking to him. God's announcing to Moshe Rabbeinu his midot. But using the word Vayikra there is very good. That'll be a very good point. I have to add that to my next share on that. Already. Any Torah Shabbat Peh questions now that the chat's over? Questions? Or we can eat our dinner now? Then later, remind me to talk about why the Korban Tamid is Dafke Keves. We have to talk about that. It's why the specific animals, but we'll get to that. Okay. Anyway, thank you everybody. And next week we'll give the announcements over to Rabbi J. But anyway, that was our introduction. Now I'm not sure how many sure we want to do in Vayikra because we can spend 5 years on this, but that's not going to work a week at a time. And I think we'll want to finish it by. I was thinking at first of finishing it by Hanukkah, but that's too short. Yeah. So but I'm sure we're going to need a Hanukkah break because there'll be special Hanukkah programming. So I'll try to get through at least. I'll get up to maybe. I'll get through the Korbanot by Hanukkah, hopefully, and then we'll deal with thing. I'll try to keep it not too detailed. I want to, the detail gets too. I want to keep it thematic, and try not to bore everybody.
We'll take
Okay, Rabbi J, take it away.
Thank you so much.
After 6 weeks, we'll take a vote. That's always very dangerous, by the way. It's very dangerous.
No, but I'm going to finish the book. The question, what rate I go in?
I understand. Right. So that's the vote. But okay. All right. I just put in the link for Tamar Wiseman's resuming her series tomorrow. I can go to register all at once. And then, of course, Tzvi Gramid also tomorrow. And, of course, Mark Shapiro tomorrow night, back on his book on Rav Kook. And let me reclaim host before if Rabbi Leibtag leaves.
Yeah. Okay.
Then I'll let
no, I'm saying I'm here. Just turn my
reclaim host. You know how it goes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyway. And what else was I going to say? Okay. I made all the announcements at the beginning. Invite a friend and enjoy the beautiful fall. I don't know what it's like where you live, but it's really been a beautiful fall in Toronto. And enjoying. We should. You don't get fall in Israel, Russia, right? There, you don't really get fall in Israel. What can you say? No, not the same as here.
All the leaves are brown.
All the leaves are brown all year, but okay. Anyway,
I'm sorry. Cool overnight, a little bit cooler, and
okay, you don't get our winters either, so you don't get our fall.
We start asking for rain in a couple of days, right? We wait.
On Zion Cheshvan, you start asking.
One little joke, Rabbi J. It's in Bavel, in Israel, we ask for rain in Cheshvan. We wait, till we get back from it, but we wait when rainy season should begin when we need it.
Right. For
now, in Bavel, they wait until December 4th, until based on which calendar you're using, but 60 days after the fall,
based on the Julian calendar, of course. Yeah. Yes.
Before the Georgian reform, whatever that is. Now, but then it got confused because that's what you needed in Bavel. Then they keep the minhag of Bavel went to Chutz La'aretz. That was just a low plug thing.
Right.
But why in Bavel don't they want rain in Cheshvan? Because the last time it rained in Cheshvan, remember on the 17th of Cheshvan, there was a flood.
I got you.
We read about it yesterday. So we don't want another flood in Bavel because we don't want the Euphrates and the Chidekel.
So you're of course assuming the flood only took place in the
That's what it says.
Right, not in the whole world, right?
Yeah.
That's whole.
So because the last time it flooded in Bavel was on the 17th.
I got it. I think we should follow the rush and say V'tein Talamatar and rain when we need rain. He tried that in Spain. It didn't work. He said it makes no sense that we in America and Europe say rain according to the Babylonian schedule, but the Jewish people are stubborn people, and it's hard to get them to change from their ritual practices. But it really does make no sense. But
the Southern Hemisphere,
if I'm not mistaken, halachically, Rav Chaim says if you make a mistake, Rav Chaim says you don't have to repeat Shmon Esrei. Even though in the Shulchan Aruch it says if you're saying V'tein Talamatar in the summer, you have to repeat Shmon Esrei. If I'm not mistaken, Rav Chaim Brisker said that that's very nice, but that doesn't really apply anymore.
By the way, the reason you have to say Shmon Esrei over, it's not because you said the wrong thing. It's not the siba, it's a siman. If you said the wrong thing, it's a siman you weren't concentrating. It's not that you said the wrong thing. It's just a sign that you
No,
weren't.
because they're saying the wrong thing. You said v'tein talamata, we don't want rain. In other words, we
No,
dafka don't want rain in the
No,
summer.
if you
That's
were
not
really
true, though.
thinking, if you're really thinking about what you need, you would have said the right thing. It's a sign you were just. It's a sign you were
Yeah,
just
so
mumbling.
why if you don't say Melech HaMishpat, you don't have to repeat the Shmon Esrei. We're only on Melech HaKadosh. If you were
Because that
correct,
doesn't change the meaning because it's not, nothing so terrible if he's Ohev Tzedek Mishpat.
so it's not. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with you on that, but okay, that's all right. But I do think Rav Chaim Paskin's halacha l'maisa, if I remember correctly, that if you say v'tein talamatar by mistake in the like early here, if you'd say it now, you think you're in Israel, and you say
Oh,
that
because
you want to be right because we really do need rain here all year, not like the Babylonians. But anyways, okay, that's not for now. Anyways, it's pretty soon we'll be having snow, so we're looking forward to the snow in I don't know 6 weeks. Give it more, yeah, give it about 6 weeks, and we'll be having snow, maybe less. Okay,
Why do you need rain in Canada?
I'm sorry.
When you get rain, is not relevant in Canada. You get rain throughout the year.
Correct.
You
That's my whole point. That's exactly my point. You could say v'tein talamatar the whole year. That's exactly correct. When
Why do you need
rains, let's move from the let's say when it rains in Toronto, they still play baseball because they just closed the roof. So let's hope. Let's see if either 3 games to Toronto, they don't have to come back for Game 6 or 1-1, and go Jays go. And that's the price you pay for me running this place. You got to cheer for the Blue Jays, or we don't let you into class. Okay, I think that's a fair deal. Okay, everybody, have a great day, a great week. We share good news. See you soon, and don't forget Benny's class. Be brief for those who want Sefer Tillim, of course. 2 o'clock today, not 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock Eastern, 8 p.m. Israel time. We'll see you, please, soon. Okay, thanks a lot. Have a good day. Bye bye.